From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has met with the army once again during a military drill on Wednesday. The troops have assured the president that they are ready to defend Venezuela's territorial integrity. During the military exercise, Maduro accused Colombia of dividing the country's armed forces.
A group of military deserters have become mercenaries of the Colombian oligarchy and conspire from Colombia to divide the Bolivarian National Armed Forces.
Por la patria venceremos.
We will win for our nation. I only need to ask to God to bless you all. We will continue the march. We will ensure our victory. We are in the right side of history again. 200 years of march, of combat, failures, and progress. But the time of betrayal and failure is over. It's time for loyalty, for victory. It is time to welcome the prosperity and progress of our country.
In the last few weeks, the military has been preparing for the upcoming Congress of Angostura celebrations, expected to be the biggest military exercise in the country's history. The army commander says soldiers are ready to sacrifice their lives for the country.
Aquí, en la patria de Bolívar y Chávez.
Here in the nation of Bolivar and Chavez, people are the one who rule. Here we do not have a king or queen. Here there is a popular power, a civil-military union to defend the country with our lives if need be. What are we going to do?
Succeed.
For who?
For Venezuela.
For who?
For Venezuela.
For our nation we will win.
And on the streets of Venezuela, people have said they are also prepared to defend their country, as opposition leader Juan Guaidó has called for a demonstration on Wednesday. Government supporters say they are ready to defend the Constitution, democracy, and the democratically elected president.
We are fighters, workers, and Venezuelan women who are not going to step back. We are going to fight for the people of Bolivar, people of Zamora, and the people of Manuela Sáenz, who was a fighter. We are here to fight and support our president, Nicolas Maduro. Let our president alone. Let him work. You have to rule in your country. We rule in ours. Here we want peace, solutions. We don't want war or violence. It's enough. The imperialism needs to stop.
Firstly, the President of the Assembly is flouting. The Supreme Court did not recognize that assembly. So that man cannot come before the people who already elected its president and say he wants to take the government. We, Venezuelans, do not agree. He is not the president, and he never will be.
The U.S. President Donald Trump should sanction his own country. He needs to care about his own country. He shouldn't believe that he will come here to bomb and kill us.
And in an earlier video message posted on Facebook, President Nicolas Maduro called for U.S. citizens to support a diplomatic resolution to political differences.
I want to have respectful relations of closeness and cooperation with the United States. The U.S. is bigger than Donald Trump. I want to have good relations and resolve our issues. Let's stay on the peaceful and diplomatic path. I ask for respect towards Venezuela and ask for support of the people of the U.S. so there won't be another Vietnam, and even less in our own America. I ask for peace and respect. We are on the right side of history.
Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is calling on Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaidó to act in the interests of the people and not foreign powers.
We call on the Venezuelan opposition to show a constructive approach, refrain from ultimatums and act independently, first of all being guided by the interest of Venezuelan people. All these initiatives face categorical unwillingness, a categorical refusal by the opposition's leader to engage in any sort of dialogue. And we see how they are publicly encouraged by Western sponsors in this destructive stance.
Russian authorities have also spoken out against any military intervention. Our correspondent Hansel Oro in Moscow has more.
A Kremlin spokesman has said that a military intervention in Venezuela will lead to extreme negative consequences and that will not solve the country's international problems. In addition, he also spoke about the new U.S. Treasury measures against the Venezuelan oil company PDVSA. The Russian Chancellor Sergei Lavrov also expressed that the United States is seeking to confiscate the Venezuelan oil funds. He also came out against the John Bolton regarding the presence of 5,000 U.S. soldiers in Colombia, rejecting the interventionist maneuvers predicted by the United States. Russia rejects the intervention from the United States and the countries that are part of the self-styled Lima Group.
We thank Hansel Oro for that report. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arraza has said once again that the U.S. is backing the attempted coup because it wants to get its hands on Venezuela's oil. On Twitter, Arraza said U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton admitted that their support for opposition leader Juan Guaidó is driven by oil. Bolton said in a TV interview that accessing Venezuela's oil reserves will make a great difference to the U.S. economy.
We want everybody to know we're looking at all this very seriously.
Venezuela's oil minister has said he is exploring legal options in response to U.S. sanctions on Venezuela's state-owned oil company PDVSA.
We have all the will to maintain operations with the companies that have our supply contract, but at the same time, we want to protect the providers of supplies and material that have contracts with PDVSA and could be affected by not being able to supply those materials and supply to PDVSA. We are assessing whether any judicial and administrative actions that PDVSA must undertake would be suspended via force majeure. But at the same time, PDVSA can, under the contractual conditions, fulfill some of the commitments that we have in the North American market. We are evaluating all actions to limit as much as possible the impact on the world petroleum market.
Moving on, authorities in Brazil have turned down former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's request to attend his older brother's funeral. The police allege there were no officers to guarantee Lula's safety or helicopters available to transport him. According to the law, prisoners are allowed to attend such services. Even when Lula was arrested during the dictatorship, he was allowed to attend his mother's funeral in 1980. Two more campesino leaders have been assassinated in Colombia. The victims have been identified as Dilio Corpus Huetio and José Jair Orozco. Huetio was a campesino guard and a member of the National Agricultural Union. He was hit by a vehicle and shot 5 times. Orozco, on the other hand, was shot in his home by 2 gunmen. Just over a dozen social leaders have been murdered so far for the year. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Following the dam collapse in Brazil, families of the missing are desperate for information. The dam owned by Vale burst last Friday, killing 84 and leaving roughly 300 missing. In the last week, close to 200 people have been rescued. Families say they've been kept in the dark.
I haven't gotten any information from my son following the accident. I called him, and the phone call went through, but no one answered. No one has told me why his phone was in such a state.
Meanwhile, the victims of the dam burst are being laid to rest in the town of Brumadinho. Friends and relatives carried coffins to burial sites at the local cemetery. This as the search for people still missing continues.
Why would you build an administrative area under a dam? This was murder. They just buried my niece. My brother-in-law is missing. Innumerable colleagues. And then? How many orphans? How many sons? How many fathers? How many friends? How many neighbors? And they come saying that it was an accident?
Waste and sludge from the mine disaster that spilled into the Paraopeba River has caused the waterway to turn reddish brown. While the toxicity of the mineral-laced sludge is not yet known, an indigenous community downstream complained that fish it relies on for its livelihood were dying. The government of the state of Sao Paulo, allied to Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, has announced the construction of 12 new prisons, 4 of them under private management. Here's a complete report on that.
4 young people were singing and playing guitar outside a house. It was getting late, and they went to buy groceries at a local store. But a police patrol detained them for allegedly robbing an Uber driver. This is the testimony of the mother of 2 of those arrested, while she walks around the João 23 neighborhood just outside Sao Paulo.
They did not want to know if they were innocent or not. Even after the 4 of them said they were not doing anything wrong, they took them to the police station. They didn't want to hear their testimonies. They just asked them to sign some documents and lock them up.
The state of Sao Paulo has 1/3 of the total number of prisoners in the country, the highest inmate population in the world. In Brazil, 64% of prisoners are Afro-descendants. Most of them are under 29 years old.
There are a lot of innocent people in jail with similar cases like this one. When it's about black people, there is no chance to be treated as innocent people. You cannot dress according to your style because they discriminate you and treat you as a criminal, especially when you live in the slums outside the city.
Governor João Doria announced the privatization of 4 prisons. In 2017, Telesur visited the first Brazilian prison under the private management model. In this prison, the inmates work for the company that manages the unit for less than half of the minimum wage. In addition, the company is responsible for the criminal defense of the inmates. The Ombudsman's Office of Sao Paulo denounced this privatization strategy, in which the more people facing imprisonment, the more profit the company makes.
That could prompt a risk of corruption related to public agents and judges, to increase penalties and to grant greater sentences. Also, if the inmate is serving a sentence, he can be involved in a serious indisciplinary penalty, so inmates can be kept in prison for longer.
The new prison system follows the US penitentiary model.
In the US, it is established by contract that each private prison needs to have an inmate population of 90 to 100%. We know that in certain states, the criminal rate decreased for a certain period, and they had to transfer prisoners of state prisons to the private ones to achieve the minimum population percentage established.
The complaints about criminal organizations emerging and controlled from the Brazilian prisons exhibits a penitentiary system reinforced by imprisonment.
What does imprisonment mean? What is the reason behind it? What does imprisonment produce? Well, it produces more violence.
According to the Brazilian constitution, the prison system should be managed by the state. Despite that, the construction of private prisons has begun.
The United Nations has declared 2019 the International Year of Indigenous Languages. Bolivia will host at least 2 international events to raise awareness about the increasingly disappearing languages. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has more.
Bolivia is at the forefront of efforts to promote and preserve this core part of cultural identity that is in danger of extinction. The country will host at least 2 international events to advocate for the preservation and revitalization of indigenous languages. One will focus on highlighting indigenous people and their languages as a source of knowledge, while the other one will showcase how indigenous languages contribute to development. It is estimated that there are about 800 indigenous peoples in Latin America, and 37 of those communities can be found in Bolivia. The Bolivian constitution, the 37 indigenous languages these indigenous people speak, as well as Spanish, are declared official languages.
We thank Freddie for that report. The indiscriminate spraying of toxic chemicals on crops is believed to be risking the health of hundreds of people living near farms in Argentina. The government is being blamed for what some are calling a public health crisis.
The governor of Buenos Aires, in tandem with the Agricultural Ministry, has allowed the unrestricted use of toxic agrochemicals in both rural and urban communities.
When Agriculture Minister Leonardo Sarkis signed Resolution 246, he gave the green light for toxic agrochemicals to be used in communities near farms. That means schools, households, as well as nearby rivers will be impacted. This proves who the ruling party is working for. Leonardo Sarkis used to be a Monsanto executive.
This new regulation paves the way for looser laws related to the use of agrochemicals. People are already aware of the negative effects they have on the environment and on health. This is a cause for serious concern. The people aren't taking it lightly.
The National Service for Sanitation and Agro-Food Quality, SENASA, is a state body responsible for ensuring the quality of products that we consume. The organization's most recent report points out that products being sold have been contaminated by fumigation.
More than 80% of the products have residues of toxins that are not allowed to be used on fruit and vegetables. So what we need is a much more restrictive law.
Monsanto Bayer handles around $100 billion in seeds globally and together with other companies manages genetically modified products. The Argentinian government is allowing these firms to get rich by risking citizens' health.
The high toxicity provoked by agrochemicals has a direct effect on human beings, an immediate effect. The chronic toxicity also has effects in the long term, particularly related to cancer.
Experts are warning that food sovereignty is being affected by these practices and that fumigation aimed at increasing the production of soy, corn, and other crops is poisoning and boosting cases of cancer and other related diseases.
Hundreds have marched through San Juan, Puerto Rico against an imminent ban on cockfighting. Some locals defend the blood sport, saying it is a cultural tradition, but the practice is widely criticized by animal groups. The cockfighting ban in all U.S. territories takes effect in December. Quinoa, one of the world's most popular health foods, has become a catalyst for the Bolivian economy, and export markets are opening up. But can Bolivia satisfy this soaring demand? We'll tell you in this report.
It is also known as the golden grain of the Andes for its extraordinary nutritional qualities. Since the United Nations declared 2013 the International Year of the Quinoa, demand has increased.
We are seeing that exports this year have been 33,000 tons and national consumption is 23,000 tons, so it's very close. It is important that the Bolivian people consume much more quinoa.
In Bolivia, consumption of quinoa has doubled over the past 6 years. It's gone from 1 kilo and 200 grams per person in 2013 to almost 2.5 kilos last year. Also last year, 33,000 tons were exported, with new export opportunities with Mexico and China.
What is interesting is that in 2018, we looked to the Chinese market. We started by exporting 40 tons, and now we have reached 200 tons.
Small campesino farmers are the main producers of quinoa in this country. The National Association of Producers comprises 20,000 families. They are now trying to boost production and exports.
The Chinese market is there. We have proposals from several Chinese companies. Therefore, we hope to concretize a deal. And they also want the product in huge amounts. So we need to be able to fulfill the huge demand.
Bolivia also exclusively produces a premium quality seed called Royal Quinoa. It is grown in the 4,000-meter summit of Salar de Uyuni. It is the only grain that provides all the essential amino acids for the human body and minerals like potassium, calcium, phosphorus, and iron.
Police in Sudan used tear gas to disperse dozens of anti-government protesters in Khartoum on Tuesday. Meanwhile, Sudan's security chief has ordered the release of those detained during weeks of anti-government protest. The demonstrations were triggered by a worsening economic crisis. Protesters have called for President Omar al-Bashir to step down. And across Nigeria, a two-day boycott of courts was called by the Nigerian Bar Association. The move comes in response to the suspension of the country's top judge, Walter Onohen. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari suspended the Chief Justice of Nigeria, who was facing charges of failing to declare his assets. Lawyers have called the suspension a deliberate attack on the country's judiciary. The United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union have all expressed concern over the move. Zimbabwe's High Court has ordered the release of activist Pastor Evan Mawarire on Tuesday after 13 days in detention. He was imprisoned on subsidiary charges. He was among those who mobilized people to protest after the government increased fuel prices. The violent protests have led to at least 12 deaths and have caused substantial damage to property.
I'm holding a copy of the judgment by Justice Chitapi giving Ivan Mawarire his freedom. So in short, the court basically agreed with us in our submissions, and in the end it granted bail to Ivan on the charge that he is facing.
A key witness in the ongoing probe into corruption under former South African President Jacob Zuma has admitted before the court that he is a racist. For days, former CEO of Bosasa Group has given a bombshell testimony before the commission. He talked about bribes and favors he did for members of Zuma's government. Now he's having to answer for a secret recording of him using racial slurs.
Please. Just understand the context. No sleep. I was beside myself, and I'm not going to make excuses. You can even hear me slur. I haven't made an excuse about this. But once again, Chair, I am a racist. I agree. Judge me on that. It's fine.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Press TV host Marcia Hashemi is expected to arrive back in Iran on Wednesday. The journalist, who has a U.S. and Iranian citizenship, was held in United States custody for 10 days. She was arrested and held as a material witness in an unnamed case. Hashemi's family alleges she suffered abuse during her incarceration. Efforts are underway to return children of self-proclaimed Islamic State fighters to their families in Tunisia. A delegation from the Tunisian government was in the Libyan city of Misurata collecting DNA from the children. Since ISIS was defeated in 2016, it's estimated 53 children of 9 different nationalities have arrived at the city's Red Crescent Center for medical treatment. A new Israeli attack on the Palestinian people has left 8 protesters injured, according to Palestinian sources. The attack took place while Palestinians were protesting in the border valley separating Sikkim Beach in the north of the Gaza Strip. While protesters threw rocks, Israeli forces responded with tear gas and gunfire. According to local sources, 20 boats were also trying to breach fishing limits imposed by Israel. They were also reportedly repelled by Israeli fire. And now it's time to bring you more stories from around the world.
Israeli security forces killed a 16-year-old Palestinian teenager at a checkpoint on Wednesday after accusing her of trying to stab them. She allegedly charged towards them after coming out of a taxi when they fired. The checkpoint separates Jerusalem from the occupied West Bank.
A checkpoint that's active during all hours of the day, especially in the morning hours. A teenage girl arrives. To our surprise, a teenage girl aged 16, a schoolgirl from Ramallah. She gets out of a taxi up here. She probably came from the Ramallah area, the Jordan Valley area. Descends by foot at the checkpoint, encounters the security guards, whips out a knife and tries to stab. The security guards, together with border police who are here, respond by fire. That hits her and she was neutralized. She was killed on the spot.
A $19 million museum tracing the evolution of Indian cinema has opened in Bollywood. It's spread across a 19th century bungalow and a modern 5-story glass structure in South Mumbai. It boasts stacks of recordings, filmmaking tools, and interactive touchscreens where visitors can watch clips from movies. According to the U.S. Congressional Budget Office report, the government shutdown has cost $11 billion. Small business owners lost business as federal government employees weren't paid for 3 weeks. U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday signed a bill to fund the government until February 15th, ending a 35-day partial government shutdown.
And finally, Thailand's authorities have been forced to close hundreds of schools in Bangkok due to toxic smog. For weeks, the Thai capital has been covered in a murky haze, causing residents to wear masks on streets and public transport. Meanwhile, the government has come under criticism for its slow response. The smog is caused by cars, unlimited construction, and pollution from factories. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And for our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on StarSat, channel 461 in South Africa, and channel 539 in Nigeria. We're on social media as well. Go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.